Hey everybody, Jake Raby here, Flat 6 Innovations, coming to you on a Monday afternoon. And I'm going to have some information that's never been shared before. We take pride here at Flat 6 Innovations in the understanding of these engines at a level that no one else has. Part of that comes from being able to gather our own firsthand data and do that in-house. So I've been studying a whole lot with air intake systems for the past 32 weeks at this point. We've always studied this stuff, but over the past 32 weeks, I've been really putting in a lot of time to develop our own intake systems that are going to be developed in conjunction with and sold by Ellen Engineering. And those are things that we've been working on for years. And honestly, everything out there sucks to the point that it was just time that we made our own stuff. We know what it takes to make it work. I know what doesn't work. I know what does work. And the Flat 6 difference is taking what works and making it better. So that is the main thing that I've been working on, and also been compiling this information for a book that I've been putting together all about M9X performance engines. Look for that in 2023. And it's going to have all the specifications from inside these engines, all the studies that you see behind me, and a whole hell of a lot more will be shared, and it's going to be unearthed, if you will. So I'm going to spin you around and go over some of this stuff with you. Now, the first thing people want to do is bitch about the way data is collected, and the first thing I'm going to do is say, before you challenge what I've got, understand that the first thing I'm going to do is ask you for your data. So if you don't have your own data, just look at mine objectively if you want to. You can keep the smart-ass comments to yourself because they're just going to get you kicked off the page. And I'm going to show you all the things that I've been working on firsthand. I've been doing this myself. Been doing it for 32 weeks. We've developed 3 intake systems. We've developed a carbon fiber air intake system. I've done a tremendous amount of things over the last 32 weeks, and I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. So I'm going to spin you around and look at what we've got here. Now, this data is airflow studies from the air filter housing only. This does not take into consideration the intake plenum, the intake runners, or any other downstream portion of the intake. This is just the air filter, and this is gross flow. So we're talking 700 CFM of airflow, which is a tremendous amount. This is showing the absolute best and absolute worst of these air filters, okay? This is critical information, and it's things people always want to bitch about, okay? I don't care what brand of stuff you buy. I care about maximizing what I'm creating by using certain filters. Now, I'm not one that goes to aftermarket filters. I actually prefer the factory panel filter because we've learned they don't foul mass airflow sensors. They don't have other issues. And then, once these filters get dirty, I've actually learned that they don't flow as well. So they will filter better, but they don't flow as well. So these studies that I'm working with now will be done in a couple of months after each one of these filters have been ran for the same amount of time on the same car. Then we'll get them back on the flow bench and test them. That's how we learn what we're talking about. Now, obviously, the same thing happens on the dyno. Tomorrow, I'll be doing the same test on the dyno with the same airbox on a 4.1 liter R40 engine belonging to Abe Schlott. Been working on that one for about 3 months now. I'm going to do all this back-to-back on the dyno again tomorrow. I might show that, I might not. But I'm gathering information as I go for a lot of different reasons. Okay? Again, you're not going to see this anywhere else. This is direct first-hand stuff. All right, so let's go over our test specimen at this point. All right? And this is the stock 9961, 9962 air filter entire assembly. Okay? This, if you've got a 99996, or if you've got a 2002 or a 2003 996, this is the same air filter box you're going to use. They use the same air filter housing. They use the same air filter. They use all of the same pieces across that entire range, okay? So this is not going to help you if you have a 997, okay? I've got all that data, but I'm not sharing that right now. I'm continuing to learn more, and that's part of the development that I'm doing with my carbon air box, and I don't want to divulge that information right now. Okay, so this is our test specimen. is just like it would be in the car, unobstructed airflow. I have 3D printed an 82 millimeter throttle body adapter that then will attach an 82 millimeter GT3 throttle body. Now, I know this adapter will flow 1080 CFM, okay? I know that this throttle body will flow 920 CFM. And I know that this tube, fitted with a velocity stack, will flow 1040 CFM, which means that the air filter adapter, the throttle body, the tube, and this stack all have the capability of outflowing the airbox. That's the key. So we have to make sure that our test specimen is not going to be obstructed by not having enough airflow. I also know that I have the most badass flow bench you can buy. This is used typically by top fuel teams for 12,000 horsepower engines and testing cylinder heads at up to 100 inches of depression. I don't know of another one of these in the Porsche industry. So it takes this amount of flow to be able to adequately put these things to a test. Because if you've got a smaller flow bench and you're trying to correct this data, because you don't have enough flow, you're going to end up with all kinds of weird coefficients and you're going to end up with data all over the place. But I know that each piece at a time is adding up to the point where I am flowing more air through my test specimen, test system, than what I'm testing, okay? Which you got to have that. All right, so now that we've talked about that, I'll tell you about a flow bench. So the idea is here that this is a means of gathering scientific data from cylinder heads, air filters, air intakes, adapters, anything that moves air. This setup will move that amount of air through it that you desire at a certain depression level. So I've tested everything here at 28 inches, which is the higher depression that people test intakes at. A lot of people test at 25 inches, but if you don't have a flow bench that can flow as much as what you're really testing and you've got to move a lesser amount of air and correct that, you would flow at like 10 or 20 inches. But I'm going straight to 28 because I have the capability to do so. So a flow bench is just a means of basically dyno testing intake components and comparing them back to back. Okay, so I use Performance Trends software here, which I also use on my dyno. I also use that on my camshaft profiler, and Kevin at Performance Trends is great about helping me set things up for all the test data that I gather, and so I can compare that apples to apples, and I can import and export files from thing to thing and file to file, and he's been a great help. Okay, so now these are the air filters that I've been testing, and some other stuff that I'm working on. Okay, and we'll talk about some of this other stuff later. But right now, I've got everything from a dirty OEM filter to a new Mala/Wix filter to a K&N filter to a BMC filter. And inside here now, I have the AFE filter. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to spin you back around so I can drive this point home, is I don't give a damn about all these other aftermarket air filter setups. I already know that the mass majority of these are not constructed correctly. They have the wrong cross-sectional sizes at the mass airflow sensor housing. They have the mass airflow sensor in the wrong place. They have a lot of problems, and that's why I don't use them. And that's why we've done videos about them in the past. So I'm not even taking those into consideration. I'm only testing all the stock housings against what I'm developing, because I don't care what somebody else is doing in the aftermarket world. I know they probably don't even spend any time on a flow bench, and if they do, they don't know what the hell the data is. So at this point in time, I'm only worried about the things that I'm doing, and I'm testing these original factory housings against my own carbon fiber housing, which is basically a capitalization of the 997 X51 that I beat by 6% across the board, by the way. that is manufactured and built 100% in America out of hand-laid carbon fiber with some multi-jet fusion parts added in it. So I don't care about your whatever brand you've got of big open air filter element or any of that. I don't care about it. I'm probably going to throw it in the garbage if you send me your car, because I don't use the stuff and I'm not going to use the stuff. That's just the way it is. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But I know that most of those systems perform worse than stock. And I've seen this over the last over 20 years working with these cars on my dyno. Okay, so I'm going to spin you back around. I just wanted to get that out of the way because everybody's like, what about this? Or what about that? I don't care about that. I care about beating the factory. That's all I give a damn about. Okay, so we got our different filters, and each of those is represented by a different color here on the plot. All right, so let's go over what the plot is. So the easiest way to derive the information in a manner in which it can be correctly compared is to have it in a plot like you see here, and then I've broken these plots down into 4 segments, okay? So basically, this is idle speed. That's 25% throttle, 50% throttle, 75% throttle, and 100% throttle. And I'll lock the plate at each one of those places with my handy little tool that I've made here, and I collect my data. And what that does is it creates a plot that's nice and easy to read, and it's going to be easy for me to publish and compare because I've done thousands of tests in the last 32 weeks, all using the same format. Okay? So what you see here, where I've got this big red cursor, that would be 25% throttle. Okay? 1/4 throttle plate opening. So at that point, this is what each one of those filters gave us for cubic feet per minute of airflow. So that red plot is the BMC filter. The black plot, which comes up on the screen always as that antifreeze green color right below that, is no filter. That's the box with no filter in it at all. That's a control. Then the blue plot is the K&N. The yellow plot is the AFE. And then the factory Wix filter is the magenta color, okay? So that's what we have at 25% throttle, okay? So now I'm going to come over here to my cursor, and I'm going to go to 50% throttle, okay? Everything is kind of about the same at 50%, even no filter at all. But, you know, obviously you've got things that are splitting hairs, and you got things that are making more flow and less flow, but really beyond half throttle, we really start to see it. Now, could I just test these at wide open throttle and go straight to that adapter? Yes, but I want to see what happens across the entire range because this is the way I'm going to be testing these in the car. So I want to see what happens when I correlate this and lay it over my dyno charts. So everything that I'm doing is done for a reason. That may or may not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. All right, so here we see that, of course, no filter, the black plot's always going to be better because you don't have any resistance, okay? And it's quite a bit better. 5 CFM, 6 CFM, something like that, okay? Let's go to 3/4 throttle. You see a big difference now, and you see that air filter not being in there in the equation is starting to really show up in some gross flow numbers because now, you know, we're talking huge differences in cubic feet per minute. But you also are noticing that really, let me zoom in right here, this area here, turn my plot off, this area right here is starting to get kind of interesting. So let's zoom in on that, okay? So now you can see that we're starting to obviously pick up more delta there. So really the AFE filter and that OEM filter are about the same. You know, the AFE's got a big advertisement out there about what it does, and so does K&N, and so does BMC, but that's why we don't listen to those things, and we do it ourselves, and we figure out this stuff firsthand. But basically, you got 2 groups there. You got the OEM filter and the AFE filter. And then you've got the K&N filter, and you've got the BMC filter. They're pretty much neck and neck, okay? turn my cursor back on so we can see what the differences really are. So basically there, you're talking the BMC at 610, you're talking the K&N at 608. You know, a couple of cubic feet per minute is within the margin of error of the device. I believe, I'd like to say that it's perfect. I'd like to say that my testing is perfect and everything at Kevin's software is perfect. But I believe that anything within 3 CFM is negligible and within the margin of error of my device. So I would say those two are the same. But we're really seeing this AFE filter, it's no better than a stock filter, okay? From a flow perspective. At this level of flow, keep in mind, we're flowing 600 CFM. This is a lot of airflow. We're only testing the air filtration system. You know, we already know that one individual intake runner is going to move just about 1/2 that amount of air because I've done those tests as well. But basically, you're seeing that this AFE filter is really no better than stock. Now, let me spin you around here, and I'll show you something about this. If you start looking at the BMC filter, and you look at the K&N filter, they have just about the same amount of glue, if you will, holding the media to the body. Okay, I don't have that AFE filter out of the intake right now. I could take it out. Maybe I'll post a picture of it later in this video in the comments section. But basically, you would see that this area that's black here and is red here comes way down a lot further on this AFE filter. It's got probably twice as much glue holding the media to the chassis or the body of the filter. And that filter is a lot heavier built, okay? You can pick it up and you can tell it's a lot heavier built. If you look over here, of course, the different construction types make this one a completely different equation. So, and of course, this one's dirty and this one's clean, same filter. But that's the big difference that I noticed with that. And if I could show it to you out of the air box, you would be able to see that. Okay, so now, let's go back here. Let's zoom back out. All right, and let's just go to what everybody wants to see. You see, I'm always concerned about down here, right? In the big picture of all this stuff. But what does everybody else want to see? Well, they all want to see what is out here at the top. Like, oh my gosh, what's the max flow? Just like a dyno graph. If I see somebody's eyes on a dyno graph go straight here, I know they don't know what the hell they're looking at. Okay, so this is your max flow. This is showing the every ounce of airflow that this filter is capable of moving. Okay, turn my cursor back on. Okay, so they're at 75%. Cursor's down here at 750. We've got the same data that I just showed you. Let me cursor it over just a little bit. And now that takes us all the way up here to max beep. Okay? So we can see that our black plot, of course, is no filter, 741 CFM, 36 or so CFM higher than the best filter. And then you compare the blue K&N with the red BMC, and boom, you're back within the margin of error. Both of those are equal and the same. But now, let's look at our other paragraphs. Let's look at our magenta line for the OEM and AFE. The AFE is way behind the curve. Okay, it's moving about 30 CFM less than the next performance filter. And it's barely beating stock. So that's outside the margin of error by a couple CFM. But I would say if you were to test this in the car, which I'll be doing tomorrow, that between a stock filter and the AFE, you wouldn't see any gain. And between the K&N and the BMC, you would see a gain. They would be basically about the same percentage of gain across the board over both of those stock filters. And then, of course, if we take the air filter out, then that's another gain that you can see, okay? That doesn't really matter because you can't drive around with no air filter unless you just want to be a dummy. And you would have bore scoring even quicker if you do that. But this is just information that's kind of information overload for some of you guys, okay? Now, I'm going to throw another little power curve at this. Let's see what a dirty air filter does, okay? I'm going to go back here and throw a dirty filter in there. So now we've got a second yellow line that has come in here. And that second yellow line has kind of changed things up because now I've added a test. So now our blue line is no filter, okay? Our dirty OEM is our black line. Okay, so that black line right there is a dirty OEM. So let's zoom in on that area. So if you look, a dirty OEM filter, a new OEM filter, and the AFE filter are all about the same. So this is the difference when you can gather information yourself and you don't read Google and you don't go to YouTube. And you don't depend on resource materials that really aren't resource materials to inform you about what you're doing. This is the flat six difference, okay? So I'll show you guys a little bit about how many of these different tests that I've done, okay? This is just one set of graphs just from the 3.4 air box. That's all that one is, okay? This is intake testing. These are intake manifold runners. Okay? Go down to our X51 stuff. We got all of that. All right? Look at how many pages of this that I've got. Test the 997 Carrera intake. Let's do the 997 cylinder head. Carrera S intake. I've got thousands of these in here. And all of this will be published. There's our different X51s. Here is my RX 3900 carbon fiber. More of that. So it never ends how much of this stuff that we have. Okay? 3.4996.1 X51. It never ends. Okay? So this is the data that helps us to create what we create. Now, down here is another test that I've been doing, and I've tested all the different plenums. I've even tested plenums after I cut them apart, welded them back together, and made modifications to them, as you can see. Stitched it back up after I changed the inside. There's two different versions of the IPD now, in case you guys don't know. There's a second generation that's came out in the last couple months. But I've tested all that. You can see here, this is a very early 3.4 intake on this side. This over here is a 3.8 Carrera S intake on this side. So I can make a couple of changes, flop that thing around on the flow bench, and I'll tell you the differences that they make. And then I'll change the plenum 15 times to tell you what that makes. And then I'll change the flap here in the back and tell you what difference that makes. So there's 4 of those. And then we'll change the throttle body size by using this nifty adapter that you'll see on the market very soon after it has a couple of changes and goes through a couple of processes, because right now it is inadequate, but I've got to make a couple more changes to this. I'm about 30 CFM low on this right now, but what this allows you to do, it allows you to use a GT3 throttle body on the standard 997 110 41603 intake plenum. So one way that you can determine if you've done enough of this work is if you've memorized every single freaking part number of what you're working with. And that's me. So I like this plenum. So we've developed adapters that will allow you to put the larger throttle body on it and maximize what it does. Now, you're going to see a lot of deviations in this. Like right here, you see there's one thickness of it here, a different thickness here, and a different thickness here. Not all of these can be used unless you use my carbon fiber air box or unless you go to the RX 39,000 multi-jet fusion printed intake. So different air filler hoses. This is basically what goes to the top of the throttle body. This is the standard X51. And people are like, oh, that's got restrictions. Nope, it kicks the pants off of this. Okay? So that's a little bit about what we're doing. You know, you want to put a GM LS throttle body on the thing, boom, that'll do it. We've 3D printed intake manifold runners from scratch. This is actually the prototype of what ended up creating this. And then, of course, there's been changes made to it. This upper plenum is being changed again to add some ribs to it. When this gets released, it's going to blow your pants off because we were able to kick the factory's tail on that. All right, so I'll spin you around here and just talk about a couple more things. So, of course, the way you test things, to me, is one factor at a time. That means you make one change at one time. That's how you end up with all these different files, okay? The files are crazy to keep track of. This stuff will end up taking over your world. 32 weeks for me have been spent doing this, gathering this information, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm not done, okay? Because now the next stage of this is just coming in because it's the dyno section of this, on the engine dyno and the chassis dyno, to work these things out and be able to do the same test that I did on the flow bench on the car. And then take that data, overlay it, and see what it did. So people aren't, why are you doing this? One, so I can get data nobody else has. Two, so I can make the best engine, continue to be the best engine. Three, so we can raise the bullshit flag when somebody makes a claim. Four, so we fully understand our product, so when somebody has a question, I can say, boom, this is the data for that. You want to know what that air filter did in this housing? That's what it did, okay? So I've also got all the same filters, Mala, I've got BMC, I've got K&N, all for the 997X51 intake, which is what I based my RX 39,000 off of. So I've tested all of those, all right? So we've talked about this RX. I'm going to spin you guys around here, and I'll show you what that is when I walk over here to the other side of the facility. I've not put the nice decal on it yet, but that's it. So this is 100% hand-laid carbon fiber, made in North Carolina, multi-jet fusion printed accessories, mass airflow housing, which has the exact same properties that the factory mass airflow housing has, which I believe and have confirmed are absolutely paramount when it comes to performance of this system. If this is too big or too small or has the wrong characteristics, it will throw off the mass airflow sensor readings and you will throw off your enrichment, and then everything that you do here is compromised. And this is the thing that the rest of the aftermarket has not learned yet. So we can use mass airflow sensor readings in the car to determine the amount of airflow is actually going through this system and going through the engine as you change things. So the test I'm doing tomorrow, I'm not going to be just getting dyno numbers. It's going to be about watching what's happening with a mass airflow sensor and logging that data to prove that we are actually moving more air through this entire system and moving more through the engine, which obviously will get picked up in dyno graphs. So this is RX 39,000. And the first of these have actually already been sold, and Ellen Engineering will be selling these in the future because we're not selling anything anymore. So just wanted to show you guys that. Hope everybody understood everything. Bruno says, is the 3.6 intake different from the 3.8? No. 997.1 has the same airbox. They are the same airbox and the same filter. The only thing different in 9971 is the 3.8 997X51 that uses a version of that carbon airbox. The other two are the same. The only difference, I'll show you here, is where it says 3.8. Okay, if that was an engine that would be like an M9605, a 3.6 car, 997.1, that would just say 3.6. Okay, so there are no differences. A lot of times we refer to this as the 3.8 airbox because we tell people to buy them on eBay because they work really well and they actually outflow most of the factory intake stuff, most of the aftermarket stuff. It's the same airbox. I've determined it on the flow bench to the T. I don't give a damn what your part number says. On the flow bench, they are absolutely a mimicked copy of each other. And then all the things on the inside that I've studied have been exactly the same. Now, there are some differences between the 3.4 air box, which I have here, and that 3.8 air box. And I'm working on capitalizing on those things for people that don't want to buy a full carbon fiber intake. Okay? Not everybody has $4,000 to spend. That's what it's going to cost. And if you say that's too much, well, I'm sorry. That's what it costs. You want to go buy some China junk? There's plenty of that you can buy. It doesn't work, but you're not going to buy it from me. But yes, the 3.8 and the 3.6, 997, keyword 997, share the same airbox. And then the 996, 9961 and 9962 share the same airbox. So for that entire lineage of non-X51s, 996 and 997, there's only 2 air filters. That's it. And they all use the same elements. The elements are the same except for the X51 997. All right, so all that cross-reference is going to be in my book, all about M9X performance engines. All this data is going to be in there. It's going to be mind-blowing. It's been mind-blowing collecting it, I'll tell you that. And now I'm at the point where I have to start putting it all into order, which is an absolute nightmare. So Jake Raby here, Flat 6 Innovations. Just wanted to go over this stuff with you guys and just be appreciative that you can get actual information like this. It's not bullshit, not made up. So before you want to complain about something, because there's always that 10% that want to complain about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and that's usually because they're motivated by somebody who would like to call themselves our competitor, but we don't have any of those because nobody does what we do and nobody does it in the flavor in which we do it. But just be appreciative that you can see some real, honest to goodness information coming straight from a flow bench from a guy that gives a damn. Raby out.